So if you're like me, you're going to want to clean the engine block really good inside and out. What I like to do on the mating surfaces is just get some degreaser on them and then take a very fine bastard file, one that's long enough to cover both sides, and to run that back and forth gently just to remove any kind of burrs that might be sticking up, any kind of hard debris. And then after that is done, take a flat piece of wood and some 180 grit sandpaper, and when this is, wipe this dry and run this along the deck surface as well. Do this to the block, do this to the heads, and this will help give the head gasket a bit more bite, and it'll also make sure that you have a nice smooth surface, as long as you know it's not warped or twisted or anything like that. You'll find that out very quickly with the file. Okay, so I just filed this side of the deck, and you can see like the shiny spots right here, right here. Those are technically where the high spots were. You want to start with an even surface, so you finish with an even surface. So now that we got rid of all those high spots that tend to be just from the casting along the head, especially along the edges, or even from like pistons coming in and out of the cylinder here, that you can get a little bit of a burr that travels high on the edge. You want to get rid of those. So after you get rid of those, you're just going to take your flat piece of wood, some sandpaper. I use 180 grit, and I just push down on it, nice even force, and comb across the block. And this will help you get a nice smooth surface from one side to the other. And the longer the wood, the better. The more of a diagonal you can get on to keep most of the surface area, the better. Alright, got the block all cleaned up. Brushed it all off with some degreaser and a little nylon brush. Got everything wiped down inside and out here pretty good. The next step we're going to take is to remove these camshaft bearings. So I have the tool here. I'll set that up and then I will drive out these camshaft bearings. Okay, so the first step with removing the camshaft bearings is just going to be to remove the cap that sits at the back of the engine here. So you just take the driver without any of the attachments on it, put it through the bearings, tap out this little cap. It should pop out with ease. And then on this particular engine, I am using the second smallest size with the black rubber sleeve for the cam bearing driver, and it's a 7/8 wrench that fits the nut. So it's just the cam bearing driver, the rod with the sleeve, and the threaded portion with the nut on it. You want to turn it until the collar expands enough to lock itself into that bearing, and then you got a snug fit. Just give it a little bit more. Make sure it feels good and it won't slip past the lip into the bearings themselves. You don't want to slip through it because that's how you ruin the bearing or ruin the journal. You take a hammer, keep it level, and just tap it through. And there's one bearing completely pushed through. So you can see how it sits in here on the... That wasn't supposed to happen. You can see where the bearing sits here on the sleeve. So with the sleeve expanded, it just butts up against the metal here and the rubber expands within it. And then we'll grab our 7/8 wrench again, and we'll just loosen off the nut. So see, it's not very much tension on there, just enough to get it tight. Then we'll slide the cam bearing off of the tool and slide it out of the journal. So you can see that's the first cam bearing removed. So we'll set that down here, keep them in order just so you can look at them as you go. Next, we'll just do it the exact same procedure for the next one. This one's a little harder to see, so you'll just have to look through the engine a bit while you're tightening and feel for that expansion to take up the room in between the sleeve and the bearing. Keep twisting until you get it nice and snug in there. And you want to have that metal butted up against the bearing itself, the metal part of the expansion sleeve butted up against the bearing. You want to make sure it's snug so that you can't slip through the bearing. Slide the cone up, helps keep you centered, and then tap it through. I'm going to take the wrench off of this for now. Another one through. And we'll just stick the 7/8 wrench down on it again. Loosen it off. Pull the wrench out. And slide the bearing off of the tool. And pull it up through. There we go. That's the number 2. So you can see how the metal rides on this edge and drives it through. Alright, keep the cone at this end. Let's see, we'll show you. Keep the cone tight in here if you can, helps keep everything centered. And then we'll toss the wrench back in. Tighten this up. And I'll show you here. So you can see how the collar is expanded here, and it's just butt up. I know you can't see the bearing itself because it's hidden in the journal, but it is snugged up right against it. The cone is butted up against the block, and then we'll drive this one through. A little loose, the wrench, slide the bearing out. There we go. Another bearing out. It's 3 down and 2 to go. It's definitely a job you can do at home, definitely something you just want to get this special tool for. It makes life a lot easier when you have it. You can see it does not take long at all. And as long as you make sure everything is good and snug, nice and square, then you won't have any problems. There we go, bearing number 4 out. And last one. Just want to make sure that this is riding up against the bearing there, so that there isn't any way that it can twist or go on a different angle and get itself jammed or push the bearing out in a way it's not supposed to be removed. So that ding at the end is just the rod, the tip of the nut hitting the end of the engine stand here. We'll loosen this off. And there is the 5th bearing. And that's as simple as it is to remove. So it's just this long rod with the cone. You butt the cone up against the block, and you've got your expansion sleeve. Like I said, this is the 2nd smallest one that comes with the universal kit. So this sleeve this is just another bushing that squares up the back. 2 separate pieces here. The sleeve and another sleeve inside it.